Why would I spend less than £10 on this t-shirt? And yet I will spend more than 4 times the amount on this t-shirt despite being the same size and the same material. Apart from the color, the only real difference you can see is the design on the t-shirt. But the logo's not the reason why I'm willing to spend 4 times more. It's how the logo and the brand makes me feel when I'm wearing it. Branding is not simply about how your company looks. Branding goes deeper than that into the emotional state. It's about how you makes your customers feel. It is about representing trust, status, and meaning. And it's that emotional connection that drives not just price, but loyalty and advocacy too. And that's where I see a lot of architecture firms failing, focusing far too much on what it looks like and not how it feels. In this video, I'm going to break down the difference and why it matters more than you think. Hi, I'm Daniel, formerly an award-winning RIBA Part 1. Now I lead a branding agency that's helped hundreds of businesses increase their value from all over the world. And now I'm on a mission to revitalize the architecture industry and help architecture leaders just like you to build unforgettable brands that will win better clients. Let's be honest, no one's teaching you this stuff at architecture school. You went and you learned how to design exceptional buildings, to create wonderful spaces, understanding the experience of the client once they're onboarded. But no one's teaching you how to build emotional resonance with clients, how to build a connection with potential prospects before they've even seen your portfolio. I'll let you into a little secret. Clients don't always choose the best architect, but you knew that already. But why? Well, they choose architects based on who they know, who they recognize, who they're familiar with, ultimately, who they trust, and who makes them feel good about the decision they're about to make. Perhaps you can relate to this. Often when I'm speaking with architects about using branding as a vehicle to build their business, I'll hear things like, "Our work will speak for itself," or "We've already got a logo and website, we're fine." When you say something like, "Our work will speak for itself," that tells me that you've got a core value of excellence. However, if no one has heard of your architecture firm or seen your projects, what makes you think that they're going to choose you? I also hear principal architects saying, "Look, we don't want to be a big firm. Branding, that's for, the global businesses." Well, no, actually, branding was the vehicle that enabled them to become a global business. Understanding this now will give you a head start over and above your competition to start driving up your business, potentially even scaling up to become something that can be globally recognized. Oh, we're just too busy at the moment to even think about doing anything with branding. If you're really busy and you're not bringing in a really highly profitable stream of income, it could be that branding is one of those elements that's missing from your business model, enabling you to have more time to yourself and more time to build the business. Oh, we've already done our branding. We've got our logo. We've got our website. We're sorted in that department. Thanks for your help though. Okay, good for you. You've got a little bit of brand identity. But that's a little bit like saying, "Our t-shirt has a logo on it. Now just pay us 4 times the amount." It doesn't quite work like that. If any of those statements sounded a little bit familiar to you, then perhaps there's a little bit of a misunderstanding or an understanding gap, perhaps, in what branding really is. So let's understand what it is and why it's important and how to apply it. Well, first of all, I think we've got this point down already. We've established that branding is simply not your logo in its own right, or your name, your brand name. In fact, they are simply put aspects and elements that we can use to identify your firm, your brand. So we've got this difference now between branding and brand identity. And before we dive into branding and why it's important, we need to understand what brand identity is first. And well, the clue is in the name, brand identity. That word identity, it's how we identify your business. It's how other people can use any of their 5 senses to recognize who it is that's being represented. So, let's have a look. Let's break down our 5 senses and understand how we can apply all of these 5 senses to your brand for its brand identity. You don't have to use all of them, but you might glean a little bit of inspiration as we go along of things that you could potentially start doing and implementing to help make your firm more recognizable. Let's start with sight. Your architecture form, your style of architecture as it is right now, could be an easy identifier for people to recognize who the architect is on the project. Santiago Calatrava, for example, and his white form, postmodern style architecture. Even Frank Gehry or Zaha Hadid might be easier to identify, but you can probably identify other architects' buildings too. Can prospects, clients, can they identify you from your style? No? Yes? Well, it's worth considering. Along with the other typical branding elements like your rendering style, for example, and your presentation style. Can people recognize you without having to read the logo at the bottom? Talking about logo, your logo design, your color palette, typography, your video and photography style. Are you branding, putting your brand identity on your workwear like hard hats or vehicle decals? All these other elements like graphic design and patterns can always be distinguishable simply and only to your firm. And the more distinguishable it is, the more it differentiates from the competition, the better chance you are and you have of building recognizability and trust with clients as people see it over and over again. And that is how, these are several ways that you can implement your visual brand identity. But we don't stop there, because there are other aspects like, what does it sound like? People use your brand name, and you've got that down already, or at least you'll have one, whether it's good or not. You've got a brand name. Have you got a tagline and slogan that people can recognize you by? If I said every little helps, a lot of us will know straight away that's Tesco as a brand. There are other ways to identify a company. When I say speech on this list here, have you got a physical voice, a person who's representing your brand through speeches, through video work, podcasting? Have you got a key person of influence whose literal voice is recognizable and identifiable and associated with your brand? If not, it's worth considering implementing. Even the tone of voice that you use and how you come across is a good idea to identify a business too, along with some more obvious ones, especially if you're using video, like a music bed. That is a soundtrack that is perhaps repeated and used often on videos or during presentations that can be associated with your architecture firm. Or even an audio logo. What's an audio logo? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. You probably know who that is without me even mentioning the name. We've got 2 out of our 5 senses nailed down. Let's move on to the last 3. Touch or feel. Now we're getting into some tangibles here and physical elements that could be attributed to your architecture firm, like materials, material choice, texture. And I don't just mean for the sake of creating a nice experience, but is there a way for you to create a familiar experience through materials and texture that can be identifiable to you as a brand? Even when you're producing your contracts and your business cards and your paperwork and anything you're handing over to clients, even the paper has texture and feel to it that could be familiar as you continue to grow your business or your brand. And last but not least, we have smell and taste. Normally, these 2 senses are really explored amongst food businesses and restaurants, cafes. You could walk into a Starbucks, and by the smell you should be able to recognize even which coffee shop you're in. With your architecture firm, if you've got multiple premises, do they smell the same? Retail brands will implement this. If you go into a large chain of fashion retailers, for example, you'll soon start to realize that they've got the same audio tracks on. They're pumping a scent into the air so that it creates a sense of nostalgia and familiarity to it. How can you implement this into your architecture firm? I say taste, and you've probably written this one off, but what if every time somebody walked into your firm, they had a very specific cup of coffee and a very specific cookie, for example? Creating that sense of familiarity using all your different senses is a really brilliant way to dive deeper into building a recognizable firm that builds trust and ultimately leads us to a deeper sense of connection, which is really what we're getting into here. Branding. Branding is more in the brain rather than the five senses that we use to identify it. So we're getting beyond identifying a business on its own, and now we're getting into meaning. What does your firm mean when people talk about you, when they hear your name being used? A little bit like our Red Bull t-shirt that I talked about earlier on from Formula One. What does it mean to you and your clients when they think about your business? Another way to wrap this up might be relating to it by personality, or even the reputation that your firm has. The meaning behind it is what we're trying to get at. Or as Marty Neumeier might say, it's about the gut feeling somebody has about your business, about your architecture firm. Particularly, what are people thinking and saying and talking about when you're not there? That is branding. It's really all about building a meaningful connection that drives a better outcome. And in this case, for your architecture firm, we are looking for you to build and focus and invest in emotion, in feeling, in finding ways to build that connection with people so that they will buy from you again, so that they will tell others about you, and so that they'll pay more as well because they've built that trust and rapport, and really they're buying how it makes them feel. Don't miss that. So we've just run through quite the list of brand identity elements and branding aspects here that are less tangible to try to influence and make a decision from. However, if you'd like to see how your firm's brand identity actually measures up against how clients potentially feel about your brand, then visit the MasterBot AI tool that I created by clicking the link in the description below. Once you arrive, simply type your website address into the tool and our bot will get to work scanning your website, and the AI system will start comparing your dream client to your brand identity and understanding what the overall picture of your branding is, looking for any alignments and misalignments, to which it's going to give you a score out of 100, as well as a checklist of to-dos in order to resolve those issues as fast as possible. Whether you see your architecture firm as a brand or not, it's really important to realize that people and clients choose brands, not firms. They choose how they feel, not simply from a list of features and benefits. I'm going to give you another example. These are probably the 20th pair of Tom's shoes that I've purchased. They're not particularly brilliantly made. They don't last very long either, at least not how I use them anyway. There's nothing essentially amazing about the design style necessarily. But again, I am buying these shoes because I feel that the brand was created for people just like me. Tom's, as a quick overview, runs on the principle of 1 for 1. If I buy a pair of Tom's shoes, I will put a pair of shoes on somebody's feet who doesn't have a pair of shoes. That could be a child in Argentina, for example. At least that's how Tom started. And formerly as a youth worker, a volunteer youth leader in my local church for 10, 15 years, that story resonated deeply with me. And by simply changing who I was buying my shoes from, I could put a pair of shoes on a child that needed them. I was buying from Tom's not on quality, not on design, but because of how it makes me feel. And in architecture, it's your responsibility to build your brand, your messaging, your tone, your copy, the visuals, your entire public system around making people feel like they can connect with you on some common ground. Your clients will pay more if they feel like you get them and that you exist for them specifically. Get this right and they will even advocate for you regularly, just like I'm doing now with Tom's shoes. Not only have I bought 20 pairs of Tom's shoes, I've probably influenced quite a few people to buy some too. If you haven't put yourself into the shoes of your client and you haven't really considered how they're potentially going to feel about your brand and how you can build a stronger, deeper emotional connection with those prospective clients, then you're going to be struggling if you're simply relying on your work to do the talking for you or your website to have all the sales influence and impact for your business. What you're ending up doing is you're trying to appeal to a mass market who have no emotional connection with you, and that really only leaves those people into a scenario where they're going to end up choosing based on price. Because the reality is that most architects can probably do a bit of everything. And if you're trying to compete with others that they're considering, the people they've already built an emotional connection with, either through personal relationship or because they've felt something from a distance through your copy, through your messaging, through whatever you're communicating through your public channels, then you're leaving your prospects to kick tires and compare you on price, really. That's it. And the chances that you're going to win those businesses and win those clients over is very, very low. And the alternative to this is to listen to what some marketers might tell you, which is you simply just need to get your name out there to more people. And well, to some degree, that's true. However, you're still leaving prospects in that same place of comparing you against other people based predominantly on price. The only way to overcome that is to start building a brand like Tom's here that resonates with a particular type of client that you're trying to appeal to. So where do we start? How do you build a brand that actually resonates on an emotional level with the type of clients you're trying to appeal to? Well, I've mentioned so far about building all your communications to resonate and specifically for a type of client you're trying to appeal to, but all of that starts in what is the biggest question that I think you can answer. What is your brand's purpose? What is the reason why you exist beyond making money? Your brand's purpose lies at the core and the heart of your business, particularly the emotional center, as it aligns and draws your customers and clients in. People want to know why you exist beyond simply making money. And here's the kicker, architects. It's not simply to design better architecture. That is true for you, but it's also true for every other architect, or at least most good architects out there. It's not enough. Your purpose needs to be distinctive. It needs to be unique, really, to you and your firm in a way that no one else can make that claim. If it has a high level of resonance for the type of clients you're trying to appeal to, well, then that ends up becoming that firm foundation for which your whole brand strategy can be built from in order to create messaging, create ads, rebuild the copy on your website, your materials, how you talk, in order to draw and build a deeper connection much faster. And that, my friends, is what branding really is about. It's not all simply about what it looks like, maybe what it sounds like, but more so, branding is about how you make your potential clients feel. You should be able to identify that. Identify what is it that we want our clients to feel. How can we build a message around helping facilitate clients to feel that much quicker? And that essentially is where your clients are making their decisions. All the features and benefits, all the wonderful things that you do, your portfolio, all of that comes later in the decision-making process. If you want to be remembered, if you want to attract better fit clients, and if you want to charge more with less resistance, then you need to stop obsessing about how your portfolio looks and start obsessing about how your brand makes people feel. And if you're not sure what that looks like right now, make sure to click the link in the description to visit the MasterBot AI tool, where you can, in 2 minutes, you'll get answers to the question how you make your clients feel. And once you've done that, if you'd like to dive deeper, why don't you join me at the Architect's Unforgettable Brand Strategy, a free 2-hour masterclass where you'll learn the 3 key stages to elevate your business into an unforgettable brand that increases your conversion rate and ultimately drives that emotional connection to creating better fit with your clients. To join me free of charge, simply click the link in the description below or visit masterplan.pro. I'll see you next time.